Hello and welcome to the MBOM podcast, where you'll learn to master the business of yoga. MBOM is a proud part of the Wander Barn Podcast Network, and I'm your host, Amanda Kingsmith. I'm a 500-hour registered yoga teacher, a yoga business coach, and a total business geek. Here at MBOM, you'll learn everything you need to know to create a sustainable yoga business by learning from myself and guests from around the world about how they built their yoga businesses, and about how you too can become a successful yoga teacher, studio owner, and much more. All right, let's dive in. Hello, everyone, and welcome back for another episode of the MBOM podcast. I am really excited that you're joining me for today's episode of the show. And this week on the podcast, I am thrilled to be joined by Patti Montella. Patti is a yoga and meditation teacher, as well as a best-selling author of the book Becoming Unshakeable: Wisdom Learned on the Journey to Inner Freedom. And in this episode, we talk about Patti's journey and career with yoga over the last 3 decades, what her own practice has taught her about being unshakable, how we can use our practice to be unshakable in life and business, even during hard times, and much more. And for me, I feel like this is a really important conversation to be having, because as yoga and meditation practitioners, it's like we understand these concepts of being able to turn inwards as opposed to turning outwards or getting upset about something. Yet it can be so hard when we see something that is upsetting or triggering for us on the internet or social media. And so we really dive into how to use this concept of being unshakable and all the practices that we know through yoga to really apply this to our life and business. So if you've been struggling over the last couple of years with everything that's been going on and all the stuff that's going on in the world, I think this will be a really beneficial episode for you. We also dive into Patti's process for writing her book, how she was able to have the discipline to do that, and then what it was like to self-publish, as well as some of the business lessons that she's learned over the last almost 3 decades of practicing and teaching yoga. So lots of goodness in this episode. I hope you enjoy it. And without further ado, here is Patti. Welcome to the podcast today, Patti. I'm really excited to have you here with me today.
Yeah, I'm excited and happy to be with you too, Amanda.
I am stoked to dive in with you. And I'm curious, where are you joining me from?
I live at the Art of Living Retreat Center up in the Blue Ridge Mountains of Western North Carolina.
Oh, beautiful. I've only been to the Blue Ridge Mountains one time and just got one hike in there. It was really close to Asheville, but it was just such a stunning area. That's amazing that you get to live there.
I actually live on a mountain called Heavenly Mountain. And I'm looking out right now at the different layers of blue in the mountains and a big sky and waiting for a snowstorm to come in. So it's a perfect afternoon for an interview.
Amazing. I love it. That's really great to hear. And I'm curious if we can, back up a little bit and talk a little bit about your yoga story and how you first got into yoga, all of that good stuff.
Sure. Well, back in the mid-90s, I was a corporate executive. And like most people in the world, I was very, very busy in the world, making money, living my life, paying the bills, all the different desires and needs and things like that were going on. And it was creating a lot of stress, a lot of chatter in the mind. And stress will come in 2 forms, either physical or mental. Mine was showing up as migraine headaches. So yoga in the mid-90s wasn't what it is today by any stretch of the imagination. And I really didn't think I was looking for something, but I met a client in Boulder, Colorado, and she told me about a breathing and meditation workshop. And I said, nothing's helped these migraine headaches. And I've gotten the message for 2 years now. I need to breathe more. I just signed up for it without knowing what it was. And the very first day of that workshop, where I learned what the meaning of yoga is and what the breath can do and meditation can do for you, I literally walked out of life as I knew it into a whole new life.
Yeah, yeah, that's amazing to hear. And so did you just continue practicing? Did you start teaching? Like what was that journey kind of like for you?
Well, yoga has, as you know, many limbs. And my initial entry into it was breath work and meditation and service. And the founder of the organization of the Art of Living Foundation is my guru, Sri Sri Ravi Shankar, the renowned spiritual leader. And I really went deep into the knowledge along with the breath work and meditation. I continued my career. And when I met him the next year, he invited me to become a full time teacher for his global organization. And to my surprise, I found myself saying yes. And the following year, I walked out of my corporate life and dedicated my life to teaching the yogic sciences. So I really was a student and a volunteer. And then very quickly, in less than 2 years, I became a global teacher of it myself. So along with the asanas, I teach the other limbs of yoga. So I didn't do anything in a traditional sense. I just went big and global immediately. And since that time, I've traveled the world teaching breath work, meditation, and the wisdom of many of these ancient texts for people to have a happier and healthier life, along with asanas and other limbs of yoga. So I would say I've taught tens of thousands of people by now over the last 27 years. It will be next month.
Yeah, that's incredible that you've been teaching, these practices for so long and being able to share them all over the world. I'd love to hear a little bit about, that portion of your career where you were, traveling and teaching and just what that was kind of like. Cause I would imagine that it was probably quite different from, how things are now. And, maybe we take the pandemic out of things since obviously things are quite weird right now, but maybe pre-pandemic where there's, obviously lots of yoga teachers and breathwork teachers, meditation teachers traveling all over the world to teach and share. But I feel like yoga is a little bit more mainstream, a little bit more well known. Like, what was that journey kind of like for you
Oh,
when you were
everybody
first?
thought I'd lost my mind, Amanda. My family definitely thought, wow, we always knew she was weird. Now we're absolutely sure of it. And I became a vegetarian because I began to be educated on the benefits of Ayurveda and a holistic lifestyle. And yeah, there's always small communities of people who practice the yogic sciences everywhere in every corner of the world who are just looking to connect with others who have that interest in understanding who am I and what is my purpose of life and how do I live a life with greater meaning and fulfillment. So I found people, especially in Boulder, Colorado back then, it's a very progressive society, but it was still difficult. I actually write about it in my book that coming from such a corporate world, I worked for a major airline and technology company. I did lose friends who didn't understand. And then there were colleagues that when I left my career literally whispered to me, do you think you figured it out? How to get out of this maze that we're in? And I just smiled and said, yeah, I can teach you if you want to. So there was a mixture, but more people were not into it than what we have today. But over time, just like, when my mom was young, smoking was cool. And now smoking is not cool. So things change, don't they? Everything changes. And back then, yoga, breathwork, and meditation or following a guru was considered not cool. Now it's very cool. So I find that if you just live your truth and live in the truth, it all works out. And I'm really happy to see how society is evolving in this regard now. And particularly with anxiety and depression almost at epidemic levels in Western society today. It's very encouraging to see that yoga and all the limbs of it are helping people, and there's more and more research on it.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I completely agree with that. And I think, just with what we've gone through globally over the last couple of years, I feel like, people more than ever really need these practices, and they really need these teachings, and, need kind of a sanctuary or like a sacred space to be able to turn inwards and kind of contemplate and understand and all that type of stuff. So it's definitely, beautiful work that you're doing. And I also just wanted to comment, it's so funny, I got my teacher training in 2015. So, what was that, 7 years ago? And I feel like my parents had that same reaction. Like, we always knew you were weird, but we didn't know you were like this weird.
That
Like, they're
word.
like, sorry, what do you do during the day? Or how do you spend your time? Like,
But it shifts because my family, it was very odd growing up in a very traditional Catholic household in the suburbs. And my dad's a Marine. And so we were raised, very traditionally according to this society. And through the years, my family and friends have seen uh, how many lives have been touched through this and the work that I do. And they just sit, and now my parents are elderly. They soak up the stories. My father was just recently very, very ill. He's 92. And I did yoga nidra for him in the hospital. And he let me do it because his body was in so much agitation. And both my parents now have let me lead guided meditations for them. And a lot of the knowledge comes through in our conversations. And I see that teach a lot of physicians and nurses and different healthcare providers, who have gone through and are going through so much in this pandemic. And everybody wants rest, rejuvenation, and happiness. And so the minds and hearts are opening to realizing all the practical and lasting benefits of what we do as yoga teachers.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. That's really beautiful that you were able to share yoga nidra with your dad in the hospital, and that he was, open to the practice and stuff. I'm sure that his body and mind were grateful for that. And yoga nidra is such like a beautiful healing modality.
Yeah, it really is. That went a little easier than a guided meditation because he kept opening his eyes on that one and making jokes. So I switched to yoga nidra, and he finally relaxed and was able to go to sleep, which is exactly what he needed in that moment.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. That's really lovely. And, your book is called Becoming Unshakable. And I want to talk a little bit about that because I think that, we've kind of alluded to it, but I think our whole worlds have really been shaken up, especially over the last couple of years. And, obviously people have their own personal stuff going on that rattles things around even more. And we really need kind of like tools and techniques to be able to cope with this stuff. But I'd love to hear a little bit about, like, to you, what does it mean to like become unshakable?
Well, when you're unshakable, it means that regardless of the chaos and uncertainty going on around you, regardless of what you like, don't like, whether you're in agreement with it or disagreement with it, no matter what's going on, you're in touch with that source within that is rock solid, steady, the source of joy, the source of happiness, the source of peace, the source of clarity. And you aren't shaken by people or events. You're able to stay in your center. And when we're able to do that, then we're able to take skillful action. Even if that skillful action is having a strong conversation with someone and drawing a line, but you're not doing it from a place of emotion. You're coming from emotional balance and strength. And so that's a whole different conversation. And right now, what we've seen in the last 2 years if we've learned anything as humanity, it's that we're not in control. There's a much higher power that is controlling the show. And whether you resist it or not, that higher power is determining how things will flow. So when you become unshakable through the yogic sciences, you're aligned with nature. And even though there are ups and downs in everybody's life, you get through it with more ease, with more grace, and with more skill. And through all these years on the spiritual path, being fully dedicated to it and teaching it, it wasn't easy in the beginning, Amanda. I would fall, get up, fall, get up. And eventually, you learn to ride the horse. And life is a lot more enjoyable, healthier, happier, and easier, not only for me by applying that knowledge and those techniques, but for everybody I come in contact with as well. I am not at all the person I was in 1995 when I first stepped foot on the path.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I mean, thank goodness for that, right? Can you imagine?
Oh my God. I used to say I'm on my own last nerve. But learning to sit in the self and be quiet and go inward and tap into that source has been an incredible and always giving source of strength and resilience and enthusiasm, no matter what's going on in the outside world. And it's been a tough couple of years for me. I was on a book tour when the pandemic started. I ended up being at our ashram in India for almost a year, which has its funny stories and magical stories and challenging stories. And then I came back, and my elderly parents have really been through, I'm at the time in life where every time you turn around, there's another health crisis. And without this knowledge of the yogic sciences, I just don't know how I would have made it through, or how I would have had the strength to help them make it through as well.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And I guess I just think about with this how, I think there's so many things going on in the world and so many opinions. And I feel like there's so many things that have become very divisive and people are very, split on them and they have their thoughts and opinions. And I just think, there's so many people, scrolling kind of mindlessly on social media. And that doesn't come from a place of judgment. I certainly have my fair share of scrolling mindlessly on social media. But, we have these things that we see that we disagree with. And it's easy to get kind of like triggered by them. And then you send maybe like a sharp or kind of fired up message into somebody's DMs. And, I just think about how I feel like what you're talking about with becoming unshakable is being able to kind of, look at that type of trigger and look at that type of thing and be able to sit with it and digest it a little bit more as opposed to immediately want to like fight about it. Is that right?
Yes, it's having an awareness of the self and not getting carried away by what's going on in the outside world. This is the Vedic wisdom that I teach. And on this path of Vedanta, it is getting beyond the dualities in the mind, the likes, the dislikes, agree, disagree. I mean, opposite values are in the world. They're there. And, but not getting shaken by it, just accepting, oh, some days are good, some days are difficult. Some people are pleasant, some people are unpleasant. Some people think this way, some people think that way. And giving others that freedom, is what helps you to have peace in yourself. Giving others the freedom to express how they want to express, as long as they, do no harm. Not everybody's going to agree with you, but not if you also get upset. Well, now there's several of you are upset, and we certainly have enough negativity in the world that as yoga practitioners, we don't have to contribute to it. You can have a difference of opinion. Sure, that's healthy. That's democracy. but not to fight over it, to find common ground is what brings peace forward. And when you have peace in your mind, you have stillness in your being, you're able to actually hear what the other person's saying and authentically consider that point of view, and then see how you can come together to move forward with what's best for all. And that's what I have learned through my guru, Sri Sri Ravi Shankar. I've seen him in so many powerful and high level meetings and situations where, terrorists and governments were at loggerheads and people were actually being killed. And I've also myself been in countries where I have brought forth peace building programs with kids who are being recruited by terrorist regimes. This is a lot more challenging a conversation than just not getting along with a sibling or a colleague or a spouse. And what I have seen is the power of the yogic sciences when practiced as a way of life to open hearts and minds to find that common ground in spite of the differences, and really good and sustainable things can happen when people meditate as a way of life and are introduced to meditation. Wonderful things can happen.
Yeah, for sure. I completely agree with that. And I feel like I've said, like, since I got introduced to these practices, over a decade ago, and felt the changes for myself personally in terms of how I was able to control reactions and think things through, and just, be a different kind of better version of myself. I thought that the world would be a much better place if everyone meditated, which is, we've got big work to do as yoga and meditation teachers, obviously. But one thing I'm curious about, all of that makes sense. Say somebody's kind of maybe new to this, or maybe they practice meditation and yoga, but they're still having a hard time with this idea of becoming unshakable. So we'll use the example of social media. Like, say you're on social media, you see something that kind of triggers you, your immediate kind of thoughts are like, fire them a message via their DMs. Instead, what do you, when you're actually practicing like being unshakable, what does it actually look like in that moment? To obviously there's awareness, taking pause, but then what do we actually do?
Well, sometimes we're not even aware enough to take pause. So, what's more practical than that is to just take a big, slow, deep breath in and take a few more, observing just your breath. Your breath is more tangible than the mind, right? So the mind can say, don't react, respond. But then the emotion says, well, I'm going to tell you off, and here's why I know better than you. Well, that's not effective communication, is it? Then you're not coming from a centered place and a place of strength. You're coming from emotion. And the person you want to communicate with, their ears are closed. They can't hear you. So the breath is so tangible. When we begin to observe our breath, we'll notice, is it shaky? Is it hot? Or is it cool and smooth and fine? If it's shaky and it's hot, that means we're not in our center. So just take some slow, cooling, deep breaths in. Slow down and cool down through the breath. Then when you respond, your intellect's going to be sharper. Your communication's going to be better. And that means when you respond, if you still feel compelled to respond, so we don't have to respond to everything, but if you feel compelled, people are going to hear you because you're going to be coming from that unshakable state. And gosh, isn't that more effective in anything? Right?
Yeah, no, 100%. I mean, I think that one of the things we're especially seeing right now, and I think we've always seen this, in particularly heated moments in history, like elections come to mind, and,
right,
on topics that it can be, get people riled
wearing a
up.
mask.
Yeah, masks,
Politics,
vaccines,
masks, vaccines.
abortions. yeah, people have all sorts of things that they find, you know, they have strong opinions on, which I think it's great to live in a world where we have people who have strong opinions. It's just people have very differing opinions, and it almost feels to me like in some ways we've sort of lost the ability to have conversations with people where we kind of hear their side of things. And like you
Exactly.
said, people are always going to have, you know, other opinions from that differ from you. Like that's just a fact of life. We're, you know, 7 something billion humans on the planet, almost 8 billion humans. Like we're not going to agree on everything. And that's a beautiful thing because everyone's different and we get new ideas and new theories and all that type of stuff. I just feel like, and I don't know if maybe it happens more on the internet because we're kind of faceless. It's a lot easier to kind of, you know, maybe say something to somebody that you would never say to their face. I think that's a part of it. But just this, I love the thought of like, okay, this person has a thought or a feeling or an opinion that's so different from what I believe in. And it makes me feel angry to just sit and take a breath with that.
Well, what's the opposite? You put out more negativity and you're not heard. So if that's easier, then do that. But it's not definitely not more effective. You know, I have to laugh thinking about people on the internet, any of us on the internet. Uh, Years, it feels like 100 years ago, I was a reservations agent for an airline, and then I was a supervisor. And people were so brave in typing, but the minute you got someone on the phone, and it's a human being to a human being connection, it's very different and everything settles down. So, one way to evolve is to look at the fact that we are part of one divinity and not to get so caught up in these limited identifications. I am for something, I am against something. I'm telling you, the minute you're so strong and I am for or against something, you're stuck to it. You're not in your center. You are not unshakable. So, understanding that we are one divinity and then we are human beings and having this spiritual experience on the planet, then those limited identifications like gender or nationality or religion can come in. But in a society today, we would be wise to turn that upside down, starting with divinity and the other identifications being lower on the scale. We seem to have turned it the other way around. I am this nationality. I am this religion. I am for this. I am against this. I am pro that. I am anti that. No, we are one divinity. We are human beings. Opposites exist. You can't have a mountain without a valley. To appreciate health, you need to have experienced illness, right? To know peace, we must shake hands with disturbance. When we embrace the opposites instead of resisting them, something in our nervous system, Amanda, settles down. And when that's something, somebody has to start it. If we're always waiting for someone else, we might always be waiting. So you begin it, right? I begin it. The people listening today, you begin. Allow that something inside to settle down, and then that heart to heart communication can begin and we can find some common ground going forward. What do you think? Does it make sense?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that this is so important. And I think about this for myself because, you know, obviously there's all these like tools and platforms for my yoga business that I want to be on and I want to be connecting with people. And, you know, in this world where it seems like people are, you know, all over the place with their thoughts and feelings and opinions, sometimes it feels like a little bit of a challenge and sometimes even a turn off to do aspects of business. And, you know, I really
Yeah.
like the idea of coming back to the practices that we know, the practices that we teach, and, you know, recognizing that it's okay for somebody to believe something different or want something different or do something different in their life, in their business. And, all I can control is how I respond to that. And I know for me, and I'm not really this way anyways, I'm not really looking for fights on social media, but um, I know for me, there's certainly things I see that are triggering and I feel that temptation. And I think, I do have those practices of, just take a breath and move on from it. But it's the type of thing that comes up later. Meditation,
Yeah,
journaling, you know, yoga, all that type of thing. It can kind of influence the way you interact with the world, I guess you could say.
it absolutely does. And as a yoga teacher, one student can tell you how wonderful you are, and 2 minutes later, another student can tell you everything that you did wrong. We cannot get lost in opinions. Our opinions change, other people's opinions change. And as you said so well, all we can control is our own mind and emotions. And when we do that, our experience of the world shifts in so many positive ways. So it doesn't mean that you're taking passive action. No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying when you accept people and situations as they are, truly, not tolerate, but accept, that something in you settles down and you can take skillful action. Now, that skillful action might be you're going to disagree, or you're going to agree to disagree, or whatever it might be. It could be you have to fire somebody, or you have to let somebody go, or you have to let somebody know, hey, when you do A, B, and C, it's not okay with me. But again, you're not letting emotion shake you. You're coming from a place of strength, clear perception, clear observation, and then effective communication. So just this morning, I did a quick little Instagram. I was in the grocery store and I was just laughing because, Christmas and all the holidays were 2 weeks ago. And now the shelves are filled with Valentine's candy.
Oh yeah, chocolate for Valentine's,
Oh,
of
yeah.
course.
We move past it so fast. And people always want to know, how to have a healthy relationship. And I was thinking it's not just a romantic relationship, it's a relationship with your spouse, with your partner, with your friends, with your colleagues, with your siblings, with all relationships that you come in contact with. How do you have it? It all begins with managing your own mind and emotions. And this, my experience in almost 30 years, is nothing is as powerful as the self reflection, the breath work, the meditation, the asanas, the service, all the limbs of yoga rolled into one so that I can be the highest expression of myself.
Hey, yoga teacher. We're just taking a quick break from the podcast to talk a little bit about technology. And maybe that's not why you became a yoga teacher. I know that that's certainly not why I became a yoga teacher. And if you're procrastinating or putting off the tech side of your business, I completely understand. When I first started my yoga business, I had never built a website before. I had no idea where to start. And I also didn't have a lot of funding to hire a web designer to build a business for me. So finding a platform that allows you to easily and effectively build your own website, create your online business while not breaking the bank is super important. And that's why Offering Tree is my go-to recommendation for yoga teachers who want their online business experience to be easy, quick, and simple. You can get your class and lesson scheduling system set up in 30 minutes with Offering Tree. Really, I'm not even joking. When I first started working with them, I was like, I have to test this for myself. And even for somebody who's not super tech savvy, it was pretty straightforward. Everything is integrated for you, including payments and video software like Zoom. So if you want to try Offering Tree for free, head on over to offeringtree.com/MBOM. Everyone gets a 2-week free trial, and you'll also get 50% off the first 3 months with my discount code. Once again, that's offeringtree.com/MBOM. All right, now back to the episode. Absolutely. And I think that we kind of know this as teachers, I think, but sometimes we have to come back to these like key practices that we are so passionate about sharing. And One thing I'd love to hear from you, because I think that sometimes this can be one thing that gets a little bit lost for us, is just, when we're so passionate about sharing these practices with our students and with other people, obviously, our self practice and our own practices are more important than ever, but sometimes they kind of fall to the wayside, or we forget about them, or we're like, oh, I taught, 4 classes today. What are some things for you that are just really helpful to make sure that you're doing these practices, on the daily yourself, as well as sharing them and being of service with them?
That is such a good question. Yeah, it's a discipline. And if you read Patanjali Yoga Sutras in the very beginning, he writes about the discipline of yoga. It is a discipline, right? Just like brushing your teeth is a discipline, taking a shower is a discipline, all the things we had to learn from our mother or whoever that influence was in our life as a child. It was a short term misery sometimes, but it always had a long term benefit. Brush your teeth today, you don't have cavities tomorrow at the dentist. So same thing with yoga is to just honor the practice, honor the discipline, and you begin to see you can set up even a vow for yourself. If you've fallen off, do not blame yourself. Because the first step on the spiritual path is not to blame yourself or to blame others. Just get up on the horse again and take a vow. You can make it a sacred vow. Don't go telling everyone, oh, I'm going to do this for 40 days. Keep it between you and your higher self. And you take that vow that I'm not going to miss my practice for X amount of days, even if I don't like it, right? The short term misery, I'm still going to do it. I don't know anybody who doesn't finish a vow of 40 days, 3 months, whatever it might be, some time bound vow for something that's good for you that says, oh, I wish I didn't do that. You always feel the sense of expansion, the sense of peace, and you come back home to why you got into this to begin with. Then when you're teaching with so much more authenticity. You're not preaching, you're actually teaching. You're giving actual experience. Our presence speaks so much more than our words. Your compassion will be richer. Your patience will be greater. Your smile will be more genuine. So you just know that some things require discipline, and this is one of them, but the payoff is incredible. And you'll have that experience again, and you'll be enjoying it even more than before.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. And then I guess this is switching gears kind of a little bit, but I want to bring it back to kind of the business of yoga. I'd love to hear a little bit about your process for writing, publishing your book, because I feel like that's, obviously you do a lot of different things, and it's hard to like make the time to sit down and work on a project like that when we're, busy humans living life and all that type of stuff.
Yeah, there is a story behind that because I have been a writer all my life since I'm a young girl. And when Sri Sri Ravi Shankar told me to write a book, I always knew I had a book in me. All of a sudden, the procrastinator side of me was front and center. And I wrote for a website for women on women who feel the fear and do it anyway in their international spotlight section. And I loved it. I would write 1,000 word articles every month, and I enjoyed interviewing people and writing it. And I remember showing the guru my year's worth of published articles, and he had 3 words for me: write a book. So I thought I had to dig deep. Why am I procrastinating on this one thing? Because the truth is, Amanda, as you know, we can do anything we really want to do. And we can make up an excuse for anything we don't want to do. So what I had to do is dive deep into the why. Why is it important to me? Not just because someone told me to do it, not because I felt it, not because, people have asked for, what is my truth behind this book? And when I connected with the why, it was much bigger than anything my small mind could come up with. The why was to leave something, a couple things. One is to help people who are beginning to wake up and demystify what the yogic sciences are, for them to see someone that hopefully they could relate to, who had doubts and questions and ups and downs and difficult people and difficult situations, and how this wisdom practically helped me navigate through. I, as a teacher of the yogic sciences, that's exactly what inspires us, right? So that was one. And the second is I am part of a global foundation with a renowned spiritual leader, and walking out of a corporate life and a so-called traditional life into this life was so different. I wanted people to also see all that goes on behind the scenes, the deep bliss, the deep peace, the inspiring stories of humanity. So again, they could be uplifted and just take even one step on the path or take another step forward. So it became more important than me writing a book. It was in service to others. And the business of it, well, I had to make a decision around that too. Get a publisher, let them pay for everything, and start putting out book proposals, or self-publish through a hybrid publisher, which I learned so much about the book business because it, like everything, is so different today, but keep all the rights to myself. And I decided in the end to invest my own money and to do it that way. And it turned out to be a really, really good decision. So, yeah, there's the business side where we have to be in the world. And then there's the spiritual side to bring that into the business and integrate the two. Worked out really well for me. But was
Yeah,
it easy? Was it easy, Amanda? No, it was so much discipline. I had to discipline myself to bring it to the finish line. Nobody else was going to do that for me. It had to come from within.
yeah, for sure. How did you do that? Did you have like a schedule where like this is the time I write, like no ifs, ands, or buts?
Yes,
Or
yes. At the end, I have taken notes on my journey with Sri Sri and on the spiritual path from day one. And I had all kinds of journals. So first it started out very methodical. That was my old corporate training. Get it in order, organize it, put it by date. And that felt like a great accomplishment. That was nothing. It was so much work, and it really didn't get me very far at all. I ended up really sticking to my spiritual practices. Not, I mean, obviously I do them every day, but adding more, tapping into intuition, and then setting up a schedule. So I figured out how many words I had to write. I could write over how many hours and how many days that would take to finish a book of 250 to 300 words. And then I set a schedule and wouldn't let myself out of the chair until that was done over a period of time. Otherwise, before that, I was writing and marinating over it, and the creative process was happening in the middle of Abu Dhabi, in the middle of Manila, in the middle of India, on planes, trains, and automobiles, everywhere in between, at airports. And began to understand it was a process. And then the discipline really comes in to bring it to the finish line. So that's how I did it. And then I found out afterwards that that's exactly what you should do. But I didn't know that going in because it's my first book.
yeah, for sure. How are you supposed to know when you've never done it before? But yeah, that's a really beautiful example of being disciplined. So thank you for sharing that. And then, so you said you ended up self-publishing your book?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well,
Amazing.
there's a way you can, it became a bestseller on Amazon instant and a bestseller in 6 categories. It's won awards. And I work though with a large hybrid publisher. So I had the support, but I kept the rights. And then, then it's a whole business. You have to market and keep doing things after that. Uh, but if you want to get your message out to people, that's what you have to do. Just like starting a yoga studio. If your love and your heart is in the practice and the knowledge and the teachings, but if nobody's showing up, you're the only one benefiting. So it's nice to have the agility to wear different hats, but through it all, keep that connection to the center of who you really are.
Yeah, I think that that's so important, especially when we embark on a journey that's new to us, like starting a business or writing a book or something like that. And I, I like to teach the business of yoga from the side of like being more heart centered. And there's going to be people who try to get you to do things or sign contracts that maybe you're not comfortable with, and we really have to pass that through our heart space and make sure it feels good. And I would imagine that embarking on a journey that's so new and so different, like writing a book and working with people around marketing it and selling it and getting it out there, has a lot of those lessons that come with it.
Well, you know what would happen to me, Amanda? I used to live in Austin for 10 years, and my family still lives there. And I now live in an ashram. It's my second time living at an ashram. So going back to Austin and going into the world of business and seeing how really things have changed so much, I always end up teaching people breathwork and meditation, even the entire staff, the CEOs, wherever I go, because that way, if we're going to work together, I would like your stress level to come down and let me help you, because that's what I'm writing about and teaching after all. And it always becomes this very beautiful exchange of hearts and minds. And you still get the business done, because business is business, but it's so much more enjoyable along the way.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And on that note, I'd love to hear, are there any kind of, major, I guess like business lessons per se that you've learned through, this journey and career you've had over the last almost 3 decades?
Oh gosh, there's so many. Because really, I was in the corporate world, the world of business for 20 years and now almost 30 years here. There are many lessons. I think for me as a leader, the most impactful have been about how to be an inspiring leader, how to listen more and talk less, observing, using the skill of observation in my daily practice, going inward and applying that whenever I'm leading a group, and understanding that everybody, while I might have really great ideas and a lot of experience, everybody has really great ideas and some form of experience. So learning how to embrace that and authentically listen to it and working cohesively, collaboratively, uh, has made being in business, when I have to be in the world of business, really so much more enjoyable, because creativity is a human value and it brings creativity into even the process of business. So those are two important things I've learned. And absolutely, I have learned the great benefit of meditation in business, because through meditation, like right now, especially small businesses, like a lot of your listeners, I'm sure, are parts of lead and run small businesses. It's such an intense time. And what I've seen in all my years, and I teach our program to corporations around the world as well, the ones who do the best through times of uncertainty are the ones who kept their head the coolest. And when you do that, there's so many benefits to meditation physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. But intuition is one of those benefits. Creativity is one of those benefits. And so rather than getting caught up in fear and anxiety, if you are practicing every day, then you're going to not come with a diminished capacity to the game. You're going to come with full capacity to the game. You might not be able to change the dynamics in the moment, but you can, through creativity and intuition and just experience and intellect, you will be able to rise above it and thrive in spite of it. This I have seen time and time and time again in any type of business with any type of leader. The one who keeps their cool wins the game.
Yeah, those are amazing tips. So thank you for sharing that. And I really love that. I feel like that's something important for all of us to keep in mind as we continue to navigate these sort of rough waters that are happening in the world and, do that with both life and business. So thank you so much for that, Patti. And I'm curious if you could share with listeners where they can go to learn more about you, where they can follow you online, maybe where they can buy your book, all that good stuff.
Yeah. So I have a website, PattiMontella.com, and I spell my name with an I, Patti, Montella, Montella.com. I'm on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, everything with that same name, Patti Montella. And you can get my book on Amazon. It's probably the easiest way. You can get it to Barnes and Noble and other online platforms, but Amazon's probably the easiest under Becoming Unshakeable with an E in Unshakable. And you can get it in a few days through Amazon.
Amazing. I will make sure that there are links to all of that in the show notes. So thank you so much for this conversation and for your time today, Patti. This has been great.
Thanks, Amanda, for inviting me. And I just wish you all the best, all the love and all the blessings in the new chapter of your life that's about to show up.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for tuning in for this episode of the podcast. To find links, notes, resources, and everything mentioned in today and all episodes of the show, you can head on over to mbomyoga.com. You can find the podcast and myself on Facebook and social media at Mastering the Business of Yoga. And I would love for you to join the private Facebook community, Yoga Business Badasses. If you have any questions, comments, or feedback, please make sure you reach out to me at info@mbomyoga.com. And last of all, if you enjoyed this episode of the show, please make sure you hit subscribe and leave a review for the podcast. It would mean the world. Thanks so much for listening, and I'll see you next week. Namaste.